Welcome to Inside Events, an international podcast focused on contemporary issues in events and festivals. This week, I'm joined by Max Korstanje from Palermo University, and we'll be talking a little bit about safety in the context of events. Welcome, Max. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what organization you work for, and why are you particularly interested in this particular topic?
All right. Above all, thanks for invitation and for this meeting. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Well, I'm interested in the problem of safety and security just after the attacks to New York City as 11 in 2001. But I expanded my investigation to other contexts like events and festivals. Well, the fact is that the turn of the century has witnessed the radicalization of countless global risks we have not contemplated in the past. For example, this radicalization includes political violence, local crimes, and almost troublesome ecological crisis, natural disaster, and so forth. So, the political violence in general, terrorism in particular, is of paramount importance for policymakers to pay attention to. As Luke Howey put it, Luke Howey is an Australian sociologist. He said terrorists don't want a lot of people dying. They want a lot of people watching. And this suggests two ideas, at least on my mind. On one hand, the media exposure in digital society adjoined to the production of mass knowledge makes that news circulates globally in seconds. And this affects seriously not only tourist destination, but also event management. Therefore, policymakers, to my end, should calibrate steps and programs to achieve safer destination. An attack to a public event or a festival has two important effects. On one hand, it generates a geopolitical tension if the foreign tourists are killed, right? A geopolitical tension because the foreign tourists have not been protected as due. On another hand, it creates the political instability of local authorities. For that reason, terrorism targets specifically public events in the world. Particularly in the recent years, as I have mentioned, two events caught my attention. One was the Boston Marathon massacre, or the attacks in the Boston Marathon. And the second one was a threat posed over the FIFA World Cup Rio in 2014. The future of event management and the tourism industry is associated to the efficacy of policymakers in making safer destinations and the application of efficient policies, probably derived from academia or not, but we need to tackle off the problems of terrorism and strengthen our resiliency against these types of bloody events.
And Max, thanks for that. That was a really good intro. And do you think that, event managers and people that run these kind of large-scale public events, do you think that they do enough to mitigate against some of these terrorist threats or political violence or, civil unrest? Do they do enough, and to what extent can they really do anything about it?
No, it's not enough. No. For example, in the organization of FIFA World Cup in Brazil, a local terrorist cell was prone to make a terrorist attack, and the event was dismantled by the local police in Rio. For each terrorist attack you see or watch in the television, there is almost 5 or 10 attempts disorganized thwarted by local police. So it is not enough. the problem of terrorism is always there.
Interesting. And so, what kind of efforts have been put in place by people that kind of run the visitor economy or like local authorities that have an event going on? What kind of things have they put in place?
Yes.
Just a couple of examples, perhaps, that try and mitigates against some of those things.
Yes, we are educated to think in terrorists like irrational agents or psychopaths, but they are rational agents. Terrorists look to maximize their gains at the minimum cost. So the exposure is a valid way, is a pathway to maximize their gains. Also, what they look is to create chaos, decontrol, to weaken the local authorities. So, as you mentioned, any attack have economic and social dimension, economic and social effects. As I mentioned, geopolitical tension among states, economic downturn because attacking a tourist destination is an efficient form of threatening the economy. Whatever the case may be, the message of terrorism is simple. It consists in saying people that anyone, anytime, and everywhere can be a victim of terrorism. And this creates a state of anxiety and panic as never before. Figure out in this way. In England, in Spain, classic terrorist attack targeted important persons. Only important persons. The Queen, the King, a chief police officer. After the turn of the century, these attacks have been retargeted to lay people. Lay people making silly things or enjoying their holidays in a tourist destination or in leisure hot spots. This radically changed to make a state of panic, to generate a state of panic, because beyond the TV, what watchers see is that all us, you and me, probably in a shopping mall or everywhere, can be a victim of terrorism. And this have two main problems. One is social ties, our relationships are undermined. We don't trust in the neighbor, we don't trust in the college, we don't trust in a peer, because he or she may be a potential terrorist. And the second one is economic. We recede at our home, we stop our plans to make holidays, and this is the two main effects I see. The literature said generate terrorism. After that, we can discuss how a terrorist mind is formed, but its effects in general are fascinating for me, and it's captivated my attention over the recent years in my publications and books. What are the effects of terrorism in our daily life, and what are the effects of terrorism for democracy? Because the counter-terrorist strategies contains many polemic strategies, many polemic tactics to get information, like torture and other human rights violations. So it is a fascinating theme that not only is limited to the attack. You have a lot to discuss respecting that, what it generates. Chauvinism, racism, the ghettoization or the marginalization of Muslim communities in developed countries. And all these have the same origin, that is the radicalization of the mind, right? A radicalization of the mind that make terrorists is like a Sherman, like a scourge virus that spreads. And it contaminates other, and it affects our relationship. This is the point that inspired me and led me to discuss this type of stuff, apply to tourism and event festival.
That's really useful. Thanks, Max. And And if we think about, the kind of tactics that's been used by people that are running these large-scale events and festivals all around the world, but from Bastille Day to the kind of the Bataclan incident that was in France, right through to the Berlin Christmas market. They've been installing, for example, barriers and barricades in order to kind of prevent large heavy good vehicles from kind of plowing into certain places. They've increased security measures, security screenings. What kind of things are people doing on the ground to try and mitigate for these types? Different kind of quite creative types of terrorism, isn't it? They've taken to various tactics to incite terror and fear. What's the response from people that are running these events? Have you seen any interesting techniques, Max?
Yes, correct. There is no unique answer for that, but we must to pay attention to how the specialized literature have changed over the time. What do you mean we talk about safety and security in tourism or urban? At a closer look, you will realize that the literature in this term have been changed in the time. For example, I will put an example. The notion of safety and security is very hard to grasp. It's very hard to define. And if you ask me, even defined, there are some similarities with other terms such as risk, perception, vulnerability, danger, resilience, and so forth. One of the best limitations of safety studies is based on the great dispersion of knowledge. Authors who come from different disciplines offer a piecemeal approach, mainly based on their own discipline or methodologies. Hence, it's very difficult to find an all-coach definition or even in event management security. The second problem is that the literature, or what we understand about this topic, have been mutated in the time. For example, in the end of this century, to be exact, in 1907, there was a founding event, specialists dubbed like Luxor Massacre in Egypt. In this event, terrorist attacks killed with cold blood almost 1664 tourists. This event changed forever the nature of safety and security in tourism. This was a time where experts considered that Muslim terrorism was a danger for tourism. But this consideration never included that the USA, England, Spain, France, European nations may be targeted by terrorism. And this happened just before the end of the century. And later of 9/11, the attacks to the World Trade Center was a real shocking event that changed it forever, not only our travel behavior, but also the security measures everywhere in the world. This applies as well for public spectacles, of course, how the security measures are handled at airports. And after this, a third event, the rise of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 have introduced new radical shifts in the way public events are imagined and the protocols to protect visitors. Each time, so what I want to say, each decade show different approach, definitions, instruments, and techniques to enhance security, safety in event management. What is more important, the excessive digital technologies as well as oral digital technology we have today make destination more vulnerable. Even the radicalization of violence and the rise of Islamic State associated with the transformation of climate change has pushed policymakers to rethink new solutions. Now, the concept of security, at least it was thought decades ago, has changed to adopt innovative ways where the disaster is considered inevitable. So my answer is, following this new axiom, there is new form of market consumption such as dark tourism, last chance tourism, post-disaster tourism that are offering good answers to the problem of human suffering. Far-fetched as this may sound, this morbid form of tourism enhance our resilience to deal with this type of disrupting events. So it's considered that the precautionary principle, which inspired the rise of risk perception theory, has set the pace to new paradigms, new conceptual paradigms like post-disaster destination, last chance destination, and other methodologies, whereas policymakers realize that, in fact, we need to focus on how to mitigate the effect of terrorism and not to eradicate terrorism. Because it's very difficult and because it is a problem that lies everywhere, stay in all countries.
Thanks, Max.
Even Argentina, even Argentina, we have suffered two terrorist attacks.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I was gonna say, Max, if people wanted to know a little bit more about this subject area, have you got any kind of suggested resources that people might want to look at going forward?
Yes, one of the reasons is the investigation and the monitoring of digital platforms, social networks, because terrorists have what to say this? Terrorists has the need to make their plans public. It is very hard to find a terrorist cell that perpetrates a terrorist attack and don't vindicate that. Or they'll say, I am the responsible for that. So earlier or before terrorist attacks, terrorist groups, which are disconnected among themselves, have a fluid traffic of information among them. So one of the counter-terrorist intelligence do is the monitoring and the control of everything what this type of group interacts among themselves. This is the most efficient way, by the hands of politics, all right, that we do. In the case of tourism, we have a dilemma. For example, this is a philosophical dilemma. We leave our security in private corporation, right? Look how we have investigated this with a set of personal interviews, personal autoethnography. He realized that security guards play an important role in enhancing security and safety in public events. However, they are not well paid. They are subject to excessive labor conditions. They often fall in some vices like alcoholism or drug addiction. They are uneducated. They are not trained as due. So it is a real paradox that we put our security in hands of private security guards. I must clarify, they are not police or army force members. They are workers like you and me, or any academic professor, right? So they have important. Yes, they have high burdens or further responsibility for public safety, but they lack of the necessary instruments to do. Also, there is a gap, there is a chasm which is occupied by terrorist attacks. So when you say, for example, do you remember the attacks perpetrated on Adriana Grande, right?
Oh, in the Manchester bombing.
In Manchester. Yeah. Right. Well, one of the problems was where was the police and security guards? And security guards was very tired, probably sleeping because they have worked excessive hours. So the paradox lies in the fact that in the capitalist society, we said that security officers, security guards are very important to protect innocent people, innocent citizens, but we are not protecting them. We are not giving them the necessary condition for a well-being, for a good job. So
those are really, really great points, actually, Max. And the interesting thing about like kind of large scale events is that public money is rediverted into so many different areas that actually the attention of security forces and the public services are distracted to a point that actually it creates, like you say, these holes in the security planning. Max, we have to leave it there. I have to shoot off now for the next podcast. But I thought that you covered some really, really useful points. And if you've got any further resources where people can learn a little bit more about this topic, then we'll add these underneath the video when we publish this online, Max. So thanks for joining Inside Events, and we'll definitely have another meeting sometime soon to interrogate some of the things that you mentioned.
No problem. Thanks so much, Mike, for the invitation and for the time and space to make my ideas public. Yes, of course, I will be sending material to share with the audience. No problem.